Nick Buckley. Nick Buckley is a mayoral candidate for Greater Manchester, but also somebody who has worked for an enormous amount of time with homeless people and with disadvantaged people, and also been drummed out of his own charity for some of his views which were not considered politically correct. So first of all, Nick, look, I just want to know about how it's going in terms of Christmas for people who are poor, disadvantaged and homeless.
Today and yesterday will just be like every other day of the year, really. We tend to only talk about this, especially homelessness, we tend to only talk about it just before Christmas, as if there's anything we can do a couple of days before to solve someone's major issues. And the fact is, there's nothing we can do 2 days before Christmas.
Just Nick, let me just explain something. Perhaps you can agree or disagree with me. But when I worked for Westminster City Council, we considered putting antisocial behaviour orders on Christians distributing food in the centre of Westminster to homeless people. Now, the reason we considered doing it, we didn't do it in the end, was because of this ludicrous situation where you had enough beds for all of the homeless people in the city, but they didn't want to go to those places because they were taking drugs or drinking heavily. And so actually, ironically, people going out onto the street, giving them food and money, were perpetuating them on the street, whereas Westminster City Council, it sounds brutal, wanted to starve them off the street, i.e. if they were given no money, no food, no drugs, then they would have to go to one of the shelters and receive the proper support. Is that still a problem?
It is a problem, but what you described there sounds really, really nasty to the average person.
Right.
Because they don't understand the layer underneath it. And the layer underneath it is the individuals who are living and dying, and don't forget the dying on our streets across the UK, are broken people. They've got severe mental health issues. They've got drug addiction, alcohol addiction as well, because they use that to try to dampen down the pain, the feeling.
So they're self-medicating.
Exactly, self-medicating. So they're broken. Giving people money and food to live on the streets and making their life slightly more comfortable to live on the streets isn't a solution to the problem.
Right.
And you're right. So what that council was trying to do was to force those individuals to access the support centres that are available. Yeah. And it's only by going to a support centre for a nice, hot, healthy meal can a social worker...
And just Nick, let's just dispel a myth. You don't have to pay to get in the shelter.
No.
So everyone's heard it. I need £5 to get into the shelter. £5 is for a rock of crack.
Exactly. And the best way to describe that is, what do you think housing benefit is for? Of course housing benefit is going to pay for the homeless person's B&B or shelter or hostel. Of course it is.
So look, I mean, we've seen a lot going on this year in terms of, I think, dishonesty about the situation that young people are in. I've just had a message saying that there is now more coronavirus in the north than ever before, so we're now going to put masks on again, apparently. Look, I genuinely believe that we have destroyed the future of many young people, or maybe not destroyed, significantly undermined it with lockdowns, with damage to their education and with masks. Sounds like a lot of our friends, including Mr. Burnham, are desperate to double down on that.
I don't think we'll ever go back to what we did 3 years ago. I don't think the public will have it. I think there's a certain percentage of the public, like some of my family members, who will start wearing masks again to go out.
Yes.
And do you know what? Let them. If that's what they want to do, because they're comfort by then that's their freedom of choice. Let them do that. But people like me, and maybe people like you, I won't be wearing masks again. Now, the damage that did 3 years ago, the government report, there's something like 100,000 young people who of school age who have never been back to school, who have disappeared off the books. And we can't find them. 100,000 young people.
But I mean, I'm not a parent, so I find it very, very difficult. But there is always a percentage of young people who have mental health problems. You know, I just make a really simple point, Nick. If you are 14 years old and you are grounded for a week or two, that is like hell. That is the most horrendous punishment you can think of, because you're quite short-termist and you're desperate to see your mates. we grounded these kids for, what, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 2 years in general. I mean, there were kids whose 18th birthday was celebrated when they were 20. If grounding is a punishment, then actually what we did to children in this country was torture.
No, absolutely. And the poorer you were as a kid, the worse it affected you, the more you were punished. If you was a middle-class kid in a 4-bedroomed house with a huge back garden, it was still bad, but it wasn't as bad as that kid living in the city centre.
I'll tell you this. Obviously this job is comparatively well paid. I was in central Windsor and I saw parents walk in with sort of 5 laptops. Now, obviously they were old laptops. I'm not saying that everyone's a millionaire, gazillionaire or whatever, but then you watched BBC London, don't watch that very often, where, 3 kids in Brixton were working off 1 mobile phone, and that was only available when Dad came home to hotspot it. And you think, during that crisis there were haves and have-nots, and I'm just sick of the piety of all of it.
Yeah, and what we need to understand about, humans in general, but especially young people, we're extremely social creatures. And we need to be around other young people to find out what, that's how we learn to be a man or a woman, by experimenting with our friends and having discussions and
I'll tell you what we're going to do, Nick. I'm in trouble for not going to the break, but you know something? I was just going to ask you to stay on for another couple of minutes. Let's go to a break, and then Janet is going to talk to you directly about some of these issues. Back in a moment. Just talking about my lunch today, I will admit that I had a couple of glasses of wine, but I think I'm feeling chipper at the moment. But anyway, I wanted to talk to Janet because she wanted to talk to Nick. Janet, I don't know what you're going to say, but you're on Talk TV. Go for it.
Hi, Andre. No, I just wanted to talk to Nick. I agree with everything he's saying. It's like our war veterans. They don't get the credit that they actually deserve. Just
to be clear, Janet, and I'm going to let Nick respond, but what is it precisely that you agree with him on?
Everything about these people that are on the streets, it's like, I'm not being funny, people in our society and different, the people that have got money, they walk around and they don't care about these people because they've not been there. You've got to have been there with nothing. We've all, at certain times in life, we've all been there, we've got nothing. I'll give you an example. This year, I was going to Tesco's now, and I was walking in Tesco's, and everybody were about the business. It was snowing, it was just very cold and wet. And there was this old man sat outside Tesco's, and he just had his head, and he was looking down to the ground. And I just looked at him, and my heart went out to him, because I knew he had nothing. And I thought of the time in my life when I was younger, and I've been there where you've got nothing. And
so Janet, look, I don't know. No, Janet, give me a second. Janet, give me a second. I don't know you, and I don't bother checking out the details of people who are coming on because I think it's more interesting to be fresh. So it sounds like to everybody you've had significant problems in your life. Just run through those with us.
No, you've got that totally wrong. I haven't had significant problems. I'm a very caring person, and I care about the needs of others, and I just don't think there's enough empathy in the world for these kind of people because everybody's so busy doing their own thing. I walked up to him that day, and I didn't have loads of money at that point in time. And I gave him a tenner, and he was like, I'd give him the world. He cried. He'd been a veteran in wars and things, And
I'll tell you what I see, Nick. Tell you what I see. Look, I come through London Bridge Station. Where we are is virtually above London Bridge Underground, and there's always a beggar in the same spot. Right, and sometimes it's a woman, sometimes it's a man, sometimes they're old, sometimes they're young. Nick, that person is a modern-day slave in reality, right? That is somebody who will be abused and probably trapped by a criminal gang. The kids running around about Black Lives Matter, they don't give a toss about modern-day slaves. And I literally walk past a slave every single day on my way to work.
First of all, I don't agree with you saying slave, and secondly, this gentleman was an old man that had been...
No, Janet, I was talking about something different. Just give us a second. Let's just, can we just go to Nick? Okay, Nick, did you hear the point I was making?
Yeah, I did. So people who are begging, they're not all the same. So you've got a certain percentage who are usually Roma, who could be trapped into being a slave, begging for a gangmaster. You've got functional drug addicts. That's their job, just to beg. They've got accommodation, but they're begging for money for drugs. Then you have rough sleepers, people who are sleeping outside, begging for money for drugs. And then the gentleman that Janet just talked about, you'll have...
he's just poor.
Just poor. He's there for a different reason, you know. So
we've had a major problem, and I'm going to go to Phil on this. And I believe that what is going to happen in the town of Windsor will lead to the death of homeless and disadvantaged people. I'm going to lay out exactly what's happened. What's happened is that the town of Windsor, under the administration that Phil and I ran, failed to crack down on begging on the streets. As a result, large numbers of tourists were giving money to people on the streets who were effectively professional beggars and paying for their drug addiction with the money. The Thames Valley Police have a policy, which, by the way, I think is despicable, to not enforce the law on begging, because they say that being on the streets is a lifestyle choice, which, by the way, is nonsense. So unfortunately, there is now a new Liberal Democrat administration in Windsor who are proposing to put a homeless shelter up, which, of course, what that means is it now creates a HQ for those people who want to beg for drugs on the street. Phil, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely, and we got a lot of stick for it. But the bottom line is, and I think, Nick, you understand this stuff, the bottom line is that people, and particularly Janet, feel sorry and they want to do something, and they want to feel better about it. So the quick fix is to pay some money to the beggar, whether they're a broken person or not is not in it. It's how you feel, because you're going to get that gratification.
And Nick, in that case, how do you resist that urge, and what do you do?
Exactly. So I get accused all the time of telling people not to help, don't help them. No. The complete opposite. I want you to help homeless people and people sat there begging. They need help. Now, doing the wrong thing for the right reasons is still the wrong thing to do. So giving people money, giving people food is the wrong thing to do. If you're a compassionate person, what you need to do is speak to that person. Why are you here? Why are you both sleeping? Can I get you some help? Do you want me to go away and ring the council and find their homeless team and get them to come out to you? Or let me do a Google search now. This hostel's open just round the corner. You can get a hot meal there. They've got beds there. Do something productive. And the thing you need to ask yourself all the time before you help is what I'm about to do going to help that person get off the streets? And if the answer's no, then you're wasting your time and you're probably making the situation worse. Only do things that get people off the streets, and that's what we need to be concentrating on. I don't want anyone on the streets in the UK. Not one person should be the target.
I think that's absolutely right, Nick. I remember probably 6 years ago or so, I was walking through the middle of Windsor and there was a chap on a bench, got a load of cans of beer under his bench and so on. He was obviously rough sleeping. And I said, what's your name? And he said, everybody calls me Pirate. I said, OK, Pirate. I said, what is it? What's the problem? And he said, well, there's nowhere to go and all this. He sounded very dazed. He didn't really know what was going on. I got on my phone to the council department responsible and said, I've got this guy here. Within 10 minutes, there was a taxi to take him to a refuge, to accommodation, so that he'd got somewhere covered overnight. But it takes a bit of time to actually do that, rather than giving him £10 so you go and buy some more beer or whatever it was.
Because Keith, the tenor is about making you feel better. What Nick's doing, and by the way, Nick has had rocks thrown at him, figuratively, not literally, for saying stuff like this. But actually, Phil turns around and says, look, at the end of the day, you're dealing with somebody with mental health problems, engage with them and make an effort. The tenor is all about you feeling better.
Yeah. I mean, these are broken. I mean, you're dead right, Nick. They're broken people. They can't think straight. They can't think like we are. I mean,
but Keith, to you, Thames Valley Police. By the way, hello to Thames Valley Police in Windsor. I believe you're going to be responsible for the death of people on the streets. We'll find out whether I'm right or wrong in the fullness of time. But this whole, it's a lifestyle choice to live on the streets and take heroin. What a load of crap.
Well, it is not a lifestyle choice. I've never met anybody who really wanted to be there.
Yeah, they aspired when they were a kid.
I've done a few things. So I used to help the homeless. They used to sleep at a particular place, and I used to go and serve them breakfast. And some of them is a lifestyle choice, believe it or not. But I don't think they were.
Yeah, but as a result of mental health problems.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it is. Look, at the end of the day, we don't know what is between people's ears. I had a situation where a guy came up to me and said to me, have you got money? I need to blah, 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 blah. I said to him, you know what you've got? You've got a talent. He said, what do you mean? I said, you've gone up to someone you don't know and you've asked them for money. I said, you should be in sales. You should be doing something like that. You've got a talent there, right? Now, I know about this because I've been in sales, and I also know because, funny enough, I was raising money for charity once, and I phoned somebody who didn't believe in a charity that I was working on. It's to do with sports. He said to me, and it came from him. He said to me, you know what you've got, Keith? I said, what is it? You've got an ability that you're not afraid to ask, okay? These people are coming up to you, they don't know who you are, and said, have you got any money, please? Right? They have an ability. Now, what I'm saying is that if people recognise that, I said, when I said to him that, he said to me, I'm trying to get my life together.
But Keith, I'm going to have a go at you. I love you to bits, you're a great guy, but I'm going to suggest to Nick that you are somebody who wants to be incredibly positive, and I think that's a fair point. But the reason they're walking up to people is not confidence, it's drug addiction, isn't it?
It's still, listen, to go up to somebody who you don't know and ask them for money takes cojones, in the words of the title of my book. And I said to this guy, I said, you could be doing something. You could be in sales. You could be asking in a professional way and making yourself a living.
I'm trying. I'll tell you what they always used to say in politics, Nick, and something I've always believed in. If you can't take the money, drink the booze and vote against them, you shouldn't be in this business.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good point there. Some of the beggars on our street, especially in Manchester City Centre, where I've worked for 20 years, a good beggar in Manchester City Centre can earn something between £300 and £400 a day.
Wow.
That's a good beggar in Manchester City Centre. An average beggar earns 80 quid, 100 quid. So there's some good money to be made there.
Sorry. An average beggar is on £700 a week in cash.
If they're begging 7 days a week, yeah.
No, absolutely.
Even in today's cashless society.
I walked up to somebody once, and I haven't got any cash, and they pulled out one of those machines. but just explain, because we've only got a minute left. Just explain the begging but not homeless thing, because most people won't understand that.
Yeah, so just because you're sat on the street begging doesn't mean you're living on the streets. The vast majority of people sat there begging have accommodation. Most people who are rough sleeping are not capable of begging because they're far too gone. Most rough sleepers do not beg.
Wow. I didn't know that. Well, OK, Nick, we've only got about 30 seconds with you left. I just want to say to you, look, Sadiq Khan, knife crime's a nightmare. Andy Burnham, I think, is really damaged Greater Manchester. What, are we ever going to be able to shift these people? I know you're running against Burnham.
Absolutely, and it won't even take much. I'm promising to end rough sleeping in Greater Manchester in 1 year, and I'll end begging in Greater Manchester in 6 months. You've got to get rid of begging before you can get rid of rough sleeping. And it all can be done. You just need a backbone and you need some determination.
Well, I have to say, Nick, the thing that I'm proud to say about knowing you is you've got the guts to say this. I hate the auction of piety, where you are willing to let people die. Read Thames Valley Police in Windsor. Let people die in order to pretend to be a good person, which if you leave people on the streets, you are emphatically not a good person. Get in touch with the show, 0344 499 1000. Calls just charged at a normal rate. Back in a mo.